The man in the ostrich boots, Ted Cruz. Let's play hardball. Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. Let me start tonight with Ted Cruz. He reminds me of a pair, actually, of movie characters. One is the cowboy, played by Slim Pickens, who rides the first bomb in the nuclear war in Dr. Strangelove. The second character the senator in the ostrich boots reminds me of is frightening in a different way. Perhaps in this case, it's a matter of downright ignorance. Ted Cruz brags incessantly about the schools he attended, Princeton, Harvard Law, yet I think there's a gap in his education. He seems not to know the history of demagogues. They tend to be explosive histories, but short ones. I think of Huey Long, who once predicted that when fascism comes to America, it will be called anti-fascism. But most of all, I think of Joe McCarthy. Ted Cruz reminds me of this guy, the sneer or smirk or whatever you call that thing, that insolent look of moral condescension, of contempt for all around him, the obvious hostility toward those whose attention he is so desperate to attract. He gets it all right. People pay attention when you strut around with a band of explosives strapped to your chest. The demagogue's mistake is in thinking they're looking at you, not the dynamite. The only question is who or what has the nerve, the person or the party, to put this Princeton cowboy in his place. Wouldn't it be great if it were a real patriot, a guy like John McCain? U.S. Congressman Jim Moran's a Virginia Democrat, and John Feary is a Republican strategist. Mr. Moran, I haven't seen anybody like this since the movies of the old Edward R. Murrow days of Joe McCarthy. He looks like the guy, he acts like the guy, he sneers like the guy, and he seems to have the same contempt for American institutions like deadlines, debts, anything like paying for the government or respecting your colleagues. Your thoughts?
He's a demagogue, Chris, and like a lot of demagogues, he's also a phony. You know, he purports to be representing the lower middle class workforce, and yet here's a guy that when he was studying at Harvard, he'd only study with the graduates at Harvard Law, with the graduates from Harvard, Yale, or Princeton, not the minor Ivies like Penn or Brown or Dartmouth. This guy is an arrogant elitist who's doing his best to manipulate a large swath of the country who doesn't know any better. I think they're going to get on to him pretty fast and realize what a phony he is, and the fact that he's leading them in a direction that's so contrary to their own best interests.
You know, John, I'm trying to figure out where this is taking him. I mean, everybody's entitled to free speech in this country. If you get elected to office, it's a great job being senator from Texas or United States Senate. It's an enormously impressive job. He's using it a certain way. I'm just trying to figure out, he's not a legislator. He's not trying to pass bills. He's not trying to really change government the way it's formulated and carried out. What is he actually trying to do? Can you figure it?
Well, I think he's trying to disrupt the political system, and he's pretty clever about it. I think he's been able to use a lot of different techniques, use social media, really disrupt this and attack other Republicans. Republicans are not necessarily popular with their base. He's very clever in drawing attention to himself. I think he's got some elements of demagoguery, but he has also stumbled onto the fact that Obamacare is extraordinarily unpopular. But in many ways, he's Don Quixote because he knows that he can't successfully get President Obama to repeal his own law. So he's almost tilting after windmills, but he does it on purpose because I think he wants people to understand that he has a plan to ultimately become a leader of a faction and then use that leadership to end a very unpopular program with the Republican base. I think he's very disruptive and in many ways very clever, but I can understand from your perspective why you don't like him very much.
Well, I can imagine him as Don Quixote because he would be fighting for the love of Dulcinea, but not for a government shutdown. What kind of a dream is that? What kind of a hope is that? Mr. Moran, your thoughts?
Oh, Chris, that bothers me so much. Don Quixote is my hero. At least he was genuine. He was an idealist. This guy is not genuine, and he's not an idealist. Gosh, John, we're such good friends, but I'm really disappointed that you'd use Cervantes' Don Quixote as an example of
Congressman,
Cruz is doing.
I didn't mean to offend you, but I do think that in many ways he's picking fights that he knows he can't win, and he's doing it for strategic reasons. And I think the reason is because you want to be able to point to something, and you want to make enemies out of people that are unpopular. So I think he's been pretty
he's
clever.
running for president.
Well,
I think you've deconstructed me rather poorly there, John Ferry, because I don't think I oppose him for ideological reasons. I oppose him because he is a problem for our republic. Anyway, Cruz's pipe dream of a strategy to get the Senate to go along with his plan, so-called, to defund the Affordable Care Act is, simply put, falling apart. He's tried to pass a continuing resolution to defund the president's health law by a voice vote. That failed. He tried to convince Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid to adopt a 60-vote threshold to pass any amendments like the one that will inevitably strip out the kill Obamacare language itself. Big surprise, that failed, too. He's lobbying Republican leadership to support him in blocking the continuing resolution from even being considered on the Senate floor. That failed big time. And he's trying to persuade Senate leaders to block a vote that would end debate and pave the way for a final vote on the very legislation he supports. Guess what? That's failed, too. Well, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, the Republican whip John Cornyn, and the chamber's most senior Republican, Orrin Hatch, have all called Cruz's bluff. In statements delivered over the past 24 hours, they have all issued forceful rebukes of Cruz's strategy. The bottom line, it paves the way for Reid to pass a clean resolution to keep the government open, and it tries to keep the government from shutting down, of course. Anyway, John Ferry, I don't know what your game is here. Are you for or against this guy? Because in me, you're saying that there's something wrong with me and not liking the way the guy's going about his business. Is this trying to do a little clipping of me on the side there as you go past me to get him? Who are you after, me or him?
I'm just trying to give you an analysis. I think he's clever. I think you need to fight Obamacare. I think in many ways he's raised Obamacare up as an issue. But I think his strategy, his short-term strategy, is obviously failing. We were never going to defund Obamacare through the
okay. Let's go back to where I'm at on this guy. Right. I watched this guy's debut, and I know first impressions don't tell you everything, but they tell you a hell of a lot. I watched him in the hearings for Chuck Hagel, who's a moderate Republican, a patriot who's fought for his country, unlike a lot of us. He went out there and fought in Vietnam. For real, just like John McCain did. For real, not chicken hawks here. Real soldiers who fought for the country and suffered for it. And he accused him, in his Joe McCarthy fashion, of taking money from the North Koreans. He then said he probably took the money, or could have taken the money, from the Saudis. All this loose talk that even Lindsey Graham, who is a gentleman, came out and said, out of bounds. That's why I call him McCarthy, not just because he looks like the guy, he acts like him. That's my problem with this guy. He has contempt for the American political system. He is not a member of any political party that I can tell. He got elected to the Senate, fair enough, but his behavior has been totally and utterly destructive. You say he's been educational. I disagree. He's taught us nothing about Obamacare. I don't know a single thing about Obamacare because of him. And you haven't learned a single thing about Obamacare. I want to go to Jim Moran on this. Congressman, he does not teach. You teach. Other people teach. Ed Schultz teaches. A lot of people on this network teach. I have never learned a thing, and neither have you, John Ferry, from Ted Cruz. He doesn't teach. He is a demagogue. Your thoughts, Mr. Moran?
Well, obviously, he has no interest in teaching. In fact, I think he benefits from his base being ignorant of the facts, frankly. But that's why I think he's running for president, because he has no future in the Senate. His colleagues don't like him, don't trust him. So he's going nowhere. He's never going to get a piece of legislation passed after these kinds of antics. But I think he's got a greater ambition. He's a very ambitious guy. I think we have to be very careful of him, treat him seriously. But we're certainly not going to learn anything from him.
What is he? Well, I'm not getting too facial. People have their own secondary characteristics. But his way of introducing almost every issue is to sneer. He sneers at people, sneers at the microphone, sneers at the TV camera. What is he sneering at? What is he looking down his nose at, John? Can you tell what it is? What is he condescending to all the time? His fellows, his colleagues, us?
I don't know,
below
Chris,
him?
Obviously, he's got a very high opinion of his own intellect. Yeah. And I think that usually when you go into the Senate, you want to spend a little bit of time learning the procedures, learning the people, and if you want to get stuff done. Obviously, he didn't come to the Senate to legislate. He didn't want to cut deals. He wants to disrupt. He wants to disrupt the political party. He doesn't have any real any kind of allegiance to the Republican Party. He spends a lot of his time bashing his fellow Republicans. So in many ways, I think he's just very disruptive. Now, that could be a good thing.
What's his role model? Is it Sarah Palin, who took an office, took the oath of office up in Alaska? I don't care if she took the oath of office, but it should have mattered to her. She took the oath of office and then walked off the job. She took French leave from the only big job she ever had. Is he going to be like that? He gets on the lecture circuit and just becomes sort of a vagabond, a troubadour of the right? Is that the goal here?
I think he's far brighter than Sarah Palin. I think his role model is his father. I don't think he has a senatorial role model. And I think that he believes passionately in what he believes in. I think he believes in himself. And I think that's what's guiding him towards whatever he's going to.
Wait. You're letting him off here. What does he believe that you don't? John, you're a Republican. You're a conservative. What does he believe you don't believe? You're letting him off a hook here, some idealist. I don't think that's true.
Listen, what I believe is in the Republican Party, and I don't think he believes in the Republican Party. I believe in trying to work through the legislative process. I don't think he necessarily believes in that. I don't necessarily believe in Ted Cruz, but I do think he's been a very disruptive and interesting figure in the political scene.
You know, I think, Mr. Moran, I think about the thing he's holding in it, and I use the reference about strapping dynamite to yourself. He is offering a real threat to our polity, to our American political system. He is threatening, to the extent he's able to do it, we don't think he's going to pull it off, but he is threatening basically to stop the United States government in its tracks till he gets what he wants, the destruction of the president's landmark bill. He then wants to be able to stop the United States government from paying its bills. He wants it to default so he can get what he wants. I mean, that is pretty close to destructive. I don't want to use the word terrorism because it doesn't mean killing people as such, but look what he's doing. I mean, this is pretty extreme behavior.
Yes, he is, but the Rush Limbaughs of the world love him. There are so many extremist commentators out there now on hate radio and some on Fox, and, he's leading the charge. And they're giving him credibility, frankly, in that right-wing echo chamber. I think we have to be careful, but I don't think he's going to derail a continuation of the government. I think we'll probably get through this period. But, boy, when we get to the debt ceiling, Chris, and then we have to keep the government funded again, say November 15th, I think Ted Cruz is going to play another important role because he's going to keep hammering away at the credibility of people who really want this government to function for the betterment of everyone.
Speaking of credibility, I think what defines the difference between him and regular conservatives, fiscal conservatives, economic conservatives, is I don't think he cares about the future of the U.S. government. We all agree on that. I don't think he cares about the future of the Republican Party. John Ferry said that. I don't think he cares about the American economy. And the Wall Street Journal editorial page does. To its credit, whatever we argue about with them in terms of policy, they don't want the American economy to crumble. This guy doesn't seem to care. And that's what's really scary to them. Thank you, U.S. Congressman Jim Moran of Virginia. John Ferry, thanks for coming on as always.